theme in lectures of E.M. Forster as literary critic. Throughout his lecture series, Forster includes commentary on the whole as a main role he plays as literary criticism in relation to literature. Literature से related उनका criticism है जो कि discussion में आया है. He makes observations about his methodology. As a critic, occasionally refers to the assertions of these other critics and sometimes questions the validity of the critic in the world of literature. In his introduction, Forster dismisses, for the purposes of his discussion, standard methods in literary criticism based in the tracing of historical development and the influence of the earlier writers on those who come after them. Likewise, Forster mentions the notion of tradition, part of Fourth by T.S. Eliot, who asserted that it is the task of the critic to preserve the best of literary tradition. This is the main thing in literary criticism. For reading purpose, Forster's series of lectures on the novel are concerned just with analysis of the novel itself, but what he deems the requirements the novel demands of the reader. He asserts, he explains that while curiosity may be what leads the reader to take an interest in the story, it is in itself a rather basic and uninteresting trait in a reader. In order to grasp the plot, however, the reader must first possess intelligence. He observes that though curiosity is the quality that allows the reader to take an interest in individual pieces of information, intelligence makes it possible for the reader to appreciate the aura of mystery embedded in plot, allowing her on him to contemplate the relationship between pieces of information. He further notes that the reader requires memory in order to recall the relationship of information provided earlier in a novel to that which comes later. It is therefore the responsibility of the writer to satisfy the reader memory by making sure each piece of information contributes to the whole. Here, after the reading, he is of the opinion that further explanation, he explains that humility is required of the reader in order to hear the voice of the prophetic in the novel, that suspension of a sense of humor is required in order to avoid the temptation to ridicule the universal or spiritual element that makes it great. In describing his requirements for the great novel, Forster thus makes clear his definition of the appropriate reader of great literature. These are study questions, important questions, and this is further idea about the universal aspect. In this discussion of prophecy, E.M. Forster touches upon the element of the universal as the most profound aspect of the novel. The universal, as Forster uses it, could also be thought of as the spiritual in the broadcast sense of term, although not necessarily in relation to a specific creed or religion. Forster, E.M. Forster, explains that the universal in a novel may refer to specific religion or spiritual practices, or it may refer to profound human emotions such as love and hate. He notes that the element of the universal in a novel may be indicated directly or it may be implied through the subtle indirect means. Now, he is of the opinion that clearly discuss that one can apply to them the saying of Saint Catherine of Siena that God is in the soul and the soul is in God, as the sea is in the fish and the fish is in the sea. His structure, tone, and style in structure, tone, and style, the narrative tone or voice of aspects of the novel is first and foremost determined by the fact that it is a printed version of a series of lectures, originally written and presented in verbal form by the author before an audience of college and university students and professors in the halls of Trinity College, Cambridge. E.M. Forster's alma mater is the name of the distinguished Clark Lecture Series, an editor's note that opens the reprinted lectures observes that their tone is informal. Now, analogy. Analogy is a use of figurative language in which the writer draws a parallel between a concrete, familiar, or easily understandable object or concept and a more abstract, original, and complex idea for purpose of explanation and clarity. The central analogy with which Forster opens and concludes aspects of the novel is an image of all of the novelists from world literature throughout history, writing simultaneously side by side in a great circular room, such as that of the Liberty of the British Museum. Foster utilizes this analogy in order to make the point that the novel and the novelist are obvious to variation in culture, history, and that all novelists write in accordance with the same basic principles of creativity. Creativity is there. E.M. Foster implies this overarching analogy in order to make clear that in his discussion of the novel, he is not interested in historical development or regional differences, but in the universal qualities. The analogy of writers working side by side allows Foster to discuss the work of the novelist who lived and worked in disparate centuries and continents in order to demonstrate their commonalities as well as differences. He thus devotes a significant portion of the introduction to placing side by side passing from such far flung Dickens novel from 1860 with an H. G. Wells novel from 1920. This is the hallmark. Now we come. This is historical details about, and this is Victorian England, World War, and in next lecture we will discuss its place in English language and literature. Have a nice day. Best of luck.